Okay, question. How many wands, staves, and spell slots would I have to burn if I wanted to use the repeat a spell activity to spam the glitter dust spell like a madman? Let's continue our conversation on exploration activities in Pathfinder 2e on this episode of The Local Disaster Tour Guide. Hello travelers and tourists, my name is Mark and I am the local disaster tour guide. That's right, I am a storyteller who is only following the experts so I can use them as a body shield. Welcome to a journey through the fantastic world of TTRPGs like Pathfinder and Starfinder. Today we are continuing our discussion of exploration activities as part of my Storytelling in Pathfinder 2e series. This is a series where we take a look at the tips, tricks, and advice that Paizo gives storytellers to help us be more successful at our gaming table. This series is intended for storytellers of every skill level from beginner to advanced, and even if Pathfinder 2e is not your preferred game, I still encourage you to stick around and be a part of the conversation. Over my years of storytelling, I have observed that studying a multitude of different games can often give you wonderful ideas to bring back to your preferred game. So regardless of where you are or what game you tell, it is my hope that this conversation will be beneficial to you. In this series, we have been working through the different modes of play in Pathfinder 2nd Edition, Encounter Mode, Exploration Mode, and Downtime Mode, and currently we are working through the different topics associated with Exploration Mode. We talked about the Game Master side of the screen, about the concepts of discovery and interacting with the world and how you can set the stage for your players in previous videos in this series. And then most recently, we started discussing the player side of the screen, the different activities that players can participate in during exploration mode. Last week we did part 1 of this conversation, where we talked about some of the big picture issues with exploration activities, what it means for the Game Master, what it means for the player, and some of the things that you want to be mindful of as a storyteller when you're making use of exploration activities. This week is going to be something of a lightning round overview of the different exploration activities that Paizo specifically lists in the core rulebook, as well as some of the details of those activities. And I'm also going to talk about some different exploration activities that I have invented for my home games and how I use them. We'll take a look at these different options, discuss their use, and discuss how we can use them as inspiration or diving off points to create our own exploration activities when we're running exploration mode in Pathfinder 2e. Now, as I like to do with this series, I always offer some rules references that you can go and read and check out if you want to dig a little bit deeper into this subject. And when it comes to exploration activities, there is some good conversation to be found in the core rulebook and the Game Mastery Guide. The core rulebook covers exploration activities on pages 479 to 480 in the Playing the Game section for players, as well as page 496 to page 497, which is the Game Mastery section. And then, if you have the Game Mastery Guide for Pathfinder 2e, you can find some additional conversation on this topic from pages 17 to 19. So, if you're looking to read a little bit more on exploration activities, those are some places that you can go and check out that information. Now, before we get started, there is one more thing that I need to do, and that is sponsor time. So I want to give a huge shout out to the sponsor of today's video, ArcKnight. ArcKnight is a Texas-based company that makes beautiful and durable die-cut plastic accessories for TTRPGs, such as flat plastic minis, object sheets, spell templates, and the number one reason they keep getting a lot of my money, RPG maps. ArcKnight sells a number of double-sided map packs that you can use for your TTRPGs that come with different themes such as wilderness or planar settings, or as you can see here, the Greystone Castle Pack. Let's bust out these maps on the table and show you what they look like. So really quick, I'm going to show you one of the sample layouts that they give you for the Greystone Citadel. As you can see here, you have a moat and an entrance area. You have some basic fortifications for the castle, and even a throne room for your players to enter. Now the next thing that I'd like to do is I'd like to step back a bit. This is one of my old RPG maps, and you see the standard folds, crinkles, creases, and other wear and tear that is associated with your standard RPG map. But as you can see, my maps from ArcKnight are actually much flatter and in better condition, and the reason is these maps don't fold, they just store as is. This leads to a more durable product that gets less wear and tear as it ages. Also, I would like to zoom in and show you something really cool about ArcKnight's maps. As you can see here, I am one of those weird storytellers that likes to use hex grids instead of square grids. And the cool thing about ArcKnight's maps is you can custom order these maps in whatever type of grid you prefer. Do you prefer the normal square grids? You can order it that way. Do you want to custom order all of their maps with hex grids like I did? That's a possibility. And even though I don't have an example here, you can also order their maps completely gridless if that's your preferred playstyle. And to give you one more sample of what ArcKnight maps look like, here is a recent construction that I used in one of my games to create a tavern for my players to explore. As you can see, the map is colorful, has light sources indicated, and once again, allow me to point out that they allowed me to order it with a custom hex grid to fit my group's gaming style. So that's just a sample of the many different maps that ArcKnight offers. I love that these maps are beautiful, that they're durable, and very easy to store. These simple plastic sleeves tuck very neatly beside my computer desk and are very easy to store and access for my games. I really appreciate the fact that ArcKnight develops products that are easy to store as a game master, meaning that I have more room for, well, all of the other stuff in my gaming space. One last thing I'd like to say about ArcKnight is the incredible respect that I have for their team. I have been a customer of ArcKnight for years, backing many of their Kickstarters, even talking to them at Gen Con, and I have placed many orders with this company. And on the single occasion that there was an error with one of my orders, their customer service team worked quickly and efficiently to get that order fixed and sent back out to me. I'm impressed by their professionalism and by the quality of products and services they provide. So if you want to check them out, I encourage you to check out the link to their website in the video description. And thank you again, ArcKnight, for sponsoring this video. Alright, so as I said at the top of this video, today is going to be a kind of lightning round discussion of some of the different exploration activities that Paizo put into Pathfinder 2e. And then towards the end of this video, I'll also talk about a few of the exploration activities that I have created for my home game and how I use them. But I want you to realize that these are sample activities. These are suggestions that Paizo has given us. They are not intended to be an exhaustive list or a hardline set of rules of the only things that players are allowed to do. I strongly encourage you, if you have not seen part 1 of this series, that you go and check that video out. I'll throw a link up here, because that video talks about some of the big picture items associated with exploration activities, and in particular it talks about being flexible with exploration activities and what that means for storytellers and players. If we want to get the most use out of this lightning round of samples, it is worthwhile to understand the big picture before taking a look at the particular instances. So, like I said, I encourage you, if you haven't seen part 1, definitely go and check that out first. But let's kick off this exploration of, well, exploration activities with one of the classic exploration activities for paranoid player characters everywhere, Avoid Notice. This exploration activity exists for players who, well, don't want to be seen. They don't want where they're going or what they're doing to be observed by other people, and they are trying to move from one location to another without being detected. This could be as simple as moving from one neighborhood to another while trying to avoid being tailed, to trying to move from one city to another while avoiding detection by an invading enemy or some other particular threat that is in the region. Anytime that your character is actively attempting to avoid notice, this is the exploration activity that you use, and the book does note that your character moves at half speed whenever they are attempting to avoid notice. Now, there are some caveats to that rule. If you have the swift sneak feat, you can actually avoid notice while moving at full speed, and if you have the legendary sneak feat, you can avoid notice while moving at full speed and performing another exploration activity of some kind. And this introduces a couple of big ideas that are associated with using exploration activities and designing exploration activities. One is to note that a lot of exploration activities effectively slow your character down, causing them to move at half speed. That is a very common effect associated with these particular activities. On top of that, it is very common in Pathfinder 2e for different options, particularly skill feats, class feats, ancestry feats, things like that, to allow characters to potentially use multiple activities at the same time. So, for example, a rogue with legendary sneak could both avoid notice and search for traps at the same time during exploration mode. Now, one possible flaw with avoid notice is if all of your players aren't using avoid notice, but they are traveling together, then it kind of negates the benefit of avoiding notice. Avoid notice is kind of one of those activities that your party needs to be all in, or it might not be much benefit. But if you have party members that don't have the skills necessary to participate meaningfully in avoid notice, be aware that you can help them out with one of the activities coming later in this video, Follow the Expert. Another good exploration activity for the paranoid player character is the Defend activity, which has a very simple mechanic. Basically, when combat starts, your character will automatically have their shield raised because, well, they were nervous and concerned and they wanted to be on the defense if anything came at them. This is a good place to pause and consider how you as a storyteller can encourage your players to use different exploration activities. Is this a scene or a location where activities like Defend would be appropriate for your PCs? Then as a storyteller, think about the environmental cues you could give off to hint to your players that danger might be imminent and that taking precautions, such as keeping a shield at the ready, would be to their advantage. While exploration activities are intended as options for players to use, it is important as a game master to actively think about what tactics or strategies might be useful for your players and ask yourself if you can relay information about appropriate activities through the different storytelling techniques that you're using. The next activity that we're going to talk about is the Detect Magic activity, which essentially allows a character capable of casting the Detect Magic cantrip to repeat that spell over and over again at predictable intervals with the goal of, well, locating any magical thing that might be in the area. There are a lot of assumptions that go into using the Detect Magic activity, which, by the way, would also apply to the Repeat a Spell activity. I'm not going to talk about Repeat a Spell separately because they follow a lot of similar principles. But the first thing to note is that Detect Magic or Repeat a Spell is going to have the Concentrate trait. It's also worth noting that repeatedly casting spells, even cantrips, can be exhausting if maintained for a long period of time, so this activity assumes that you're going to be moving slower, typically half speed, maybe even less, and if a character isn't taking reasonable breaks in casting spells, they will probably become fatigued after about 10 minutes. In regards to Detect Magic, the book notes that if your character is moving at a speed of 300 feet per minute or less, which translates to 30 feet per round or less, so if you're sprinting along with a party elf, that you will automatically notice any relevant magical aura, assuming that you meet the conditions necessary. If you want to detect magical auras before entering the area of those magical auras, you need to be moving at a speed of 150 feet per minute or less, which translates to roughly 15 feet per round or less. So typically with detect magic, especially if you're trying to be super cautious, you are going to be moving very slowly. Follow the leader is a very important exploration activity that exists for circumstances where multiple party members might be involved in a scene, but not all of the party members necessarily have the skills to participate in that scene or participate in that scene with a reasonable chance of success. The classic example that Paizo uses, and we talked a little bit about last week, is a stealth scene where the rogue is skilled and perfectly at home, but the poor warrior is out of his league and quite likely to draw attention to the party. The rogue can attempt to assist the warrior, and we talked in the previous video about the role playing out how the rogue is assisting, how the warrior is following along. But one player can attempt to assist another player and allow them to have a higher bonus when they attempt that particular skill. Now there are some restrictions here. First off, following the expert is typically going to have the auditory and visual traits, and it definitely has the concentrate trait. And the character that is helping their allies must be at least expert in the skill in order to provide assistance. If you are the character that is following the expert, instead of your normal proficiency bonus, you get a proficiency bonus equal to your level, with an additional bonus based on the skill level of the person you are following. So, if you're following someone who is expert in the skill, your bonus is your level plus 2. If they're master, it's your level plus 3. And if they are legendary, it's your level plus 4. So roughly, following the expert can take you from untrained in a skill to functioning as if you were trained to expert in a skill, depending on who is giving you advice. By the way, Paizo does note that repeatedly following an expert is a great excuse to allow a character to train or retrain into a skill if they spend a lot of time following one of their allies in using a particular skill. Up next is the hustle exploration activity, and this one is relatively simple, but it also serves as an important benchmark if you are attempting to develop your own exploration activities for your game. Basically, the hustle activity allows you to move at double your normal travel speed. However, because this activity is more strenuous, you can only do it for a limited period of time. You use the lowest constitution modifier of all of the participating characters with a minimum effective constitution modifier of +1, and then you multiply that times 10 minutes to determine how long a character or group of characters can travel at double speed. So, for example, if you have a character whose constitution modifier is +2, they could hustle, effectively traveling at double speed for 20 minutes before needing to rest. By the way, if you put that same character with a con mod of +2 in a group of characters who had a lot more stamina, say maybe a halfling thief with a group of dwarves, man, who could I be ripping off there? The entire group would use that con modifier of +2 when determining how long they could use the hustle activity. Also, the book does note that the hustle activity has the move trait. I imagine this will almost never be relevant since this is outside of encounter mode play, but it does technically have it. The next two exploration activities are very similar to one another and are really just a reflection of different types of skill checks, and that is the investigate activity and the search activity. Both of them involve examining your environment, trying to locate or figure out things about your environment, discovering secrets within the environment. Both of these allow your player characters to interact with and discover elements of the environment, the world around them. Essentially, the main difference between investigate and search is investigate is an activity associated with recall knowledge checks. So if the wizard is making arcana rolls, if the cleric is making religion rolls, if the investigator is rolling society, then it probably falls under investigate, whereas if the rogue is using perception, it more likely qualifies as search. In either case, investigate and search both come with the concentrate trait, and both of these activities will cause your character to move at half speed or less. In fact, for the search activity, it specifically notes rules very similar to detect magic, where if your skill checks are successful, you will spot things as long as you're moving at 300 feet per minute or less. But if you want to spot things before coming into close proximity to them, you need to be moving at a speed of 150 feet per minute or less. Now, search specifically calls out you need to move slower if you don't want to walk into the situation before you discover it. I could see investigate kind of following a similar pattern in certain instances, but just be aware that Paizo does note some similarities between search and detect magic or other repeat a spell activities, and that might be relevant to investigate as well. Now, if your party is expecting a fight, one particularly useful exploration activity that they might want to consider is the scout activity, where one character spends time either going ahead of the party or falling behind the party a bit and keeping an eye out for attackers, ambushers, situations where the party might be in danger. If someone has dedicated themselves to the scout exploration activity, then when combat begins, all players get a +1 bonus on their initiative rolls. By the way, Paizo doesn't note that the scout actually needs to make successful rolls in order for this to apply. This might be a GM discretion area as to whether or not the scout has to make successful rolls in order for this bonus to be useful. I would say if the scout is not able to warn the party of attackers, then this bonus might not apply. But then again, as a GM, you also don't want to be too mean. It might be considered harsh to just flat out deny bonuses, so consider the balance on that. But rules as written, if one player is scouting for the party, when it's time to roll initiative, everybody gets that +1 bonus on their initiative, which can allow your party a decided advantage in responding to whatever the threat may be. Hello everyone, Editing Mark here. So as I was reviewing all of the exploration activities that were being covered in this video, I came to the realization that I left out a very important one in the original script, which is the Refocus activity, which can be found on page 300 of the core rulebook. Refocus is an exploration activity that is centered around the focus spells that many classes use. Caster classes will typically come with focus spells that are available to them, so clerics might get domain spells, while wizards might get focus spells related to the particular school of magic that they are dedicated to. But even some non-caster classes can end up with focus spells as well, good examples being the champion, the monk, and the ranger. Any character with access to a focus spell will have a focus pool, which is a number of focus points that they can spend in order to activate their focus spells. Pretty straightforward. Typically, you'll start with 1 focus point, although there are a few classes or subclasses that can start with 2 focus points instead, and throughout the course of a character's career, certain class feats or features may increase the number of focus points that a character has access to. Now, there is a hard cap when it comes to focus points of 3 focus points. No matter which class features you take, no matter how many focus spells you get, there will always be that hard cap of 3 focus points. Just be aware that that restriction is consistent. Now, the cool thing about focus spells is they are intended to be spells that can be repeated throughout the day with just a little bit of recharge time in order for the caster to kind of get that energy back. That is the purpose of the Refocus activity. It allows characters with focus spells to get their focus points back, and the basic requirement to use the Refocus activity is that a character must have spent at least 1 focus point since the last time that they gained focus points. If you've lost some focus points, you can then spend 10 minutes to regain exactly 1 focus point. And that 1 focus point is regardless of how many focus points that you have previously spent. So if a character has 3 focus points available in their pool and they spend all 3 of their points, if they refocus, they only get 1 point back, and they cannot get any more points back until they have spent that 1 point again. So even if a character has a maximum of 3 focus points, that maximum can potentially lower depending on how many focus spells are being used at a given time before a character refocuses. There are certain class feats inside of the game that can allow characters to regain more than 1 focus point whenever they use the refocus activity, but the base amount that you as a game master should be aware of is when a character refocuses, regardless of how many points they've spent, they regain 1 focus point up to that maximum of 3. When characters refocus, they have to do something that is in line with their class or whatever the source of their magic might be. So, for example, a cleric or a champion that is using the refocus activity is probably going to be spending time in prayer or meditation, in religious reflection of some kind, in order to get that point of focus back. By the same token, a wizard that wants to regain their focus is probably going to spend some time studying or researching spells that correlate to their particular style of magic. The core rulebook actually uses the example of an illusionist spending time studying illusions or spell text related to illusions in order to regain that focus point. The point I'm making here is, as a game master, these are golden story opportunities. Every so often, spend some time asking your players how they are refocusing. Let them add some flavor, some flair to the particulars of how their character recenters themselves or regains that focus inside of the game. Now, the refocus activity is a little bit unique compared to many other exploration activities in that the rulebook specifically notes that a character can refocus alongside other exploration activities, assuming those exploration activities correspond to whatever is appropriate to their class. And they give us a couple of examples. One of the examples that they use is that the cleric, if they are the party healer, could refocus while at the same time treating the wounds of the party. And if you had a wizard who specialized in illusion magic, they could attempt to refocus while at the same time deciphering a scroll related to illusion magic. It is possible for the refocus activity to overlap with some of the other exploration activities that might occur inside of the game. It's a little niche of the rules, but I think it's interesting, and it can help to speed up certain aspects of exploration play. So as a game master, be willing to be flexible about allowing characters to refocus if the other exploration activities that they're doing would correspond to what is normal or appropriate for their class. Okay, I don't think I missed anything else on exploration mode. Let me know in the comments if I did. Back to my regular video. There are also a number of different skill activities that can be used in exploration mode that characters might choose to dedicate their focus to during a particular span of time in play. Examples of this could include the borrow a spell or learn a spell activity. A lot of different social activities assume a certain spread of time and are typically more appropriate to exploration mode, so things like coerce, gather information, make an impression, those kinds of activities are often very directly associated with exploration mode. And even activities like impersonating another person might be something that a character needs to dedicate their actions to during exploration mode. A character can attempt to cover tracks during exploration mode, and they can also attempt to track others. Both of these use the survival skill. And there are a number of technical, crafting, or design-related skill activities that can also fall into exploration mode. You can decipher writing, you can make repairs, you can identify alchemical items or magical items, and there are certainly plenty of scenes where a group may be traveling through a region while a wizard is trying to crack an ancient spell book or identify a peculiar magical item that the party has discovered. On occasion, you might see activities that can be encounter mode or exploration mode activities, such as the squeeze action. If you have a group of characters who are traveling through, say, a cave system, they might need to devote some or all of their time to squeezing in order to make progress through those caves. And as many a Pathfinder 2e veteran can tell you, the Treat Wounds exploration activity is one you are going to get a ton of use out of because your players do get injured and patching up those wounds is incredibly important. Paizo also lists the Sense Direction activity as another option that your players might be able to participate in. Now, the last thing I want to do is talk about some examples of exploration activities that I use in my home games, and these are just some samples that I have used, but I want to offer them as kind of a starting point for conversation of activities you might design for your game. Now, my players really enjoy exploration style games. I've done several of them at this point, and they have proven pretty popular. And when I do exploration style games, I always have some exploration activity that could be considered some version of the Find Secrets exploration activity. Last video I talked about one game where I gave my players access to an activity called Magical Research. The focus of that particular exploration game was finding secret magical spots that were hidden around the map. And my players had the option of using magical skills to try to research and see if they could find clues of where these magical locations might be. And I gave the players the choice, if they didn't think they were close to a location, they could skip out on the research and focus on other things that might allow them to travel faster. But if they weren't doing the research, they very well could miss important clues. There was a little bit of a push-pull in putting that option in the game. In the current game that I'm running, Magical Research isn't a major part of the storyline, but there is still functionally a Find Secrets option. As my players are traveling around the map, they can, if they choose, devote some time to trying to find secrets that might be helpful to them. In my current campaign, this usually comes in the form of bonus supplies or extra consumable magical items that might be beneficial to the party. If they go slower, they might find stuff to help them out, but there are certainly risks if they allow themselves to travel too slowly. Another skill that I'm using in my current campaign is an exploration activity that I call Crisis Management. And I love using this one. The current scenario that my party is going through is that they are escorting a wagon train of refugees trying to escape the fallen nation of Lastwall and the undead armies that are overtaking that particular territory. By the way, now you know why the Find Secrets is such a risk for my players. They need help, but they're also being chased by an army. Well, my players have been given a large wagon full of different NPCs that they are responsible for protecting and trying to get across the border. And one of the options that I give my players for exploration activities is crisis management, because bad things can happen to more than just the players. There are plenty of people in that wagon train, and something could go wrong for one of them. So I give my players an option. They can put one person on crisis management, and if something goes wrong with the wagon train, that character is quickly available to respond to the circumstance and try to prevent things from going completely off the rails. But if a character is devoted to crisis management, that means they can't help with the active skills that are being used to get them to the border. It creates some tension in the story every single time that I pick up my crisis die to see if something happens that day. So those are just some quick examples of exploration activities that I've added to my home games, and you can see that in your story there may be situations where adding a unique activity could be appropriate to the story you're trying to tell or the situation you're trying to create. So in all of these exploration activities, remember that this is a flexible tool to help you as a storyteller. Don't view them as rigid constraints, but rather as options to help further your story. But I think it's time to turn the conversation over to you. What are your thoughts on the different exploration activities that we discussed today? Were there any exploration activities that I left out that you think are important to talk about? And are there any unique exploration activities that you have created for your home game? Let me know how you've used exploration activities to enhance your stories, or if you have any questions about these particular exploration activities. As always, if you've enjoyed this video, Like it and share it, subscribe to the channel. You can check out my free Discord and my Patreon, both linked in the video description. By the way, don't forget to check out the link to the sponsor for this video, ArcKnight, which is in the video description as well. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for being a part of the conversation, and have a wonderful day.